Everyone's a Critic is the 4th episode of the 7th season of Frasier. This is directed by Pamela Fryman, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a decent episode. I don't think it'll ever be a personal favourite. No reason for that, just it's not one that stands out to me as being the best of the best, but nevertheless it's still really great. And it starts off down at KCL and we meet Poppy Delafield, played by Katie Finneran, who is the boss of the owner of KCL. And she's very high energy, and Frasier clearly is very uncomfortable and manages to pass her on to Roz so he doesn't have to spend time with her. We're then back at the apartment, and Eddie might have killed somebody's missing hamster, which is a depressing thought. Not that I blame Eddie in the slightest. And then Niles arrives with some news. He is the new art critic for the Monocle. And that's fantastic. Very well done, Niles. When Niles is out of the room, Martin asks Frasier if he's okay, or if he's maybe a little jealous, and Frasier tries to brush it off and pretend that he's not jealous. And this is a bit of an awkward situation for Frasier, because on the one hand, it is very clear that this is something Frasier would have loved to have done, but at the same time, he's successful. He has a radio show. It's not like Niles has everything and he has nothing. Quite frankly, it's usually the other way on. And it would be unfair for him to be jealous. So obviously he tries to brush it off and pretends that he's absolutely fine with this. We're then down at KCL. Gil and Roz are being bothered by Poppy. Frasier, Niles' review is out. Frasier is then talking with Roz, and it's very clear that this is bothering him. And she tries to remind him, you have your own radio show, you can talk about things on air. And quite frankly, Frasier does often mention things that are maybe a little off topic, but things that he's very knowledgeable and passionate about. And suddenly this sparks an idea. Why doesn't he do an art show? And it just so happens that Kenny also happens to be down at Cafe Nervosa, and Frasier asks Kenny for an art show. And it seemed like for a couple of seconds that Kenny was considering this. Having a culture show could be a really good idea. It's not something they currently have. And then Kenny leaves, and bless him, he's absolutely adorable. He comes scurrying back in seconds later to kind of apologise for Frasier, or to Frasier rather, that he was leading him on. There was no way he was ever going to accept a culture show. He shouldn't have given him false hope. And I just thought that was really sweet. It was a very adorable moment. And needless to say, Frasier is not happy about this. And I think it's a good idea. I don't listen to a lot of radio. This is despite the fact I have a qualification in radio. We'll ignore that. Great experience. Absolutely loved it, but I did nothing with it. And I don't listen to that much radio, but when I do, it's usually something culture-based. There is absolutely an audience for it. And unfortunately, Kenny didn't see that. However, Frasier's not given up. We're back at the apartment. Poppy is there. Daphne's facial expressions in response to Poppy, just absolutely brilliant. They're fantastic. And Frasier happens to mention that it would be a good idea to have this culture show, but maybe the idea could come from somebody else. And initially my first thought was the idea could come from Poppy. But actually, he was going higher than that. He wanted the idea to come from Poppy's mother, who runs the station, who owns the station. And Poppy phones her mother, pitches this idea, and it's very clear she's used to getting what she wanted. And she does. She gets the go-ahead. She gets the green light. Frasier's really excited about this. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Martin also comes home, and Eddie is lolling around. Poor thing had to go and get some tranquilizers because there's a petition to get him out of the building. They're trying to make him seem like this vicious, aggressive breed, and he can't be there, all because he ate somebody's lost hamster, which isn't great, but it wasn't exactly a vicious attack on anybody. And Martin went to get him some tranquilizers so he could look calm, which is interesting because Eddie, when he's outside and playing and seeing things, that's going to be different. But it's not as if Eddie's particularly high energy. He's kind of the opposite of Poppy in a lot of ways. He doesn't really run around much. He doesn't bark that much. He's quite a calm dog, unless he's doing a trick or something. So it's quite interesting. It would be interesting to see what Eddie is like when he's outside and there are distractions and he's at the park. That would have been really lovely to see. But he gets the tranquilizers and the poor thing's just lolling around the floor. And then we go back down to KCL, and I'm so annoyed that I could remember what happened next, because I can't remember my initial reaction. With rewatching Frasier, I generally remember most episodes, but in terms of specifics, there are things that I haven't remembered, and that's great because it means I get to enjoy the comedy almost as if it's for the first time. It's one of the few benefits of having a really bad memory. But I could remember what happened next, so I can't remember if it's obvious or if it comes as a surprise. If you've watched this for the first time, I'd love to know what you think of it. But Poppy arrives in time for Frasier's new art show, and it turns out that it's Poppy's show. She kind of didn't fully understand what Frasier was getting at. It's not as if Frasier said, ask your mother if I can do a culture show. He just said it would be good if the station had one. And of course, Poppy thought, yeah, that's a great idea. And she thinks it's her show. Well, it is her show. That was the go-ahead. And everybody else's reaction to this at KCL, just absolutely brilliant. And we end with a rather sweet moment with Niles and Frasier at Cafe Nervosa. And Frasier's obviously unhappy about the show. It turns out Niles got fired as well, so neither of them are critics, and they're both back to a slightly more level playing field, and they both agreed, very much in keeping with the Crane Boys' attitudes, they both agreed that they were meant to lose their jobs because they were spreading themselves too thinly. And to be fair, I think that's a valid point. I don't necessarily think they were spreading themselves too thinly. Going to 1 or 2 shows a week, not really going to do that much difference, but I think it's a valid point if that's how they want to feel about it. So it was a nice way to end it. And we actually end it with Poppy walking around KCL, and once she goes out of shot, everybody comes out of hiding. Although I will say, somebody, who was it? I can't remember who it was now, but somebody was not doing a very good job of hiding in one of the windows. I think it was the window to Frasier's room. I can't remember, but somebody was lying down, but you could see them. You could still see their shirt. It was very clear, unless they were pretending to sleep or something, but I could see them. They weren't hiding very well, but everybody else kind of came out of nowhere, and it was a nice way to end things. It's a good episode. As I said, nothing wrong with it. Really thoroughly enjoyable. It's never going to be a favourite, just because there's maybe nothing about it that stands out as being particularly amazing, but absolutely really brilliant. That thought kind of drifted off into nothing. It's a really great episode. I don't think I have any personal highlights. I guess just everybody's facial expressions when they meet or spend time with Poppy. I rather enjoyed that. We got a couple of bits with Eddie, which is always quite nice. And I liked how the story concluded with Frasier and Niles. I thought that was rather nice as well. So, all things considered, absolutely no complaints at all. I think Everyone's a Critic is a really nice episode, really good fun. And for a few years, I was actually a theatre critic. Initially, it started off as a competition at the local newspaper, and then I just carried on doing it. And I have to say, it was an absolute joy, but also I don't miss it because it is very tiring, so I can maybe understand why they'd be spreading themselves too thinly. Certainly with Niles, because he was going to events afterwards and mingling, and it wasn't just a case of go there, go home, write the review. There was a lot more to it than that, so maybe I can understand a little bit why they were thinking that. But either way, great opportunity for Niles. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but the episode did. Everyone's a Critic is definitely a really enjoyable episode of Frasier.